Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to explore a heartfelt story about Tu Na and Alex, a journey filled with silence, sacrifice, and the quiet kind of love that often goes unspoken. Together, we'll witness choices that test the heart, moments of forgiveness, and the courage it takes to open a door once closed. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Your support truly means the world to us. Tu Na never meant to eavesdrop. She was outside, crouched over a shallow basin, gently rinsing her baby's tiny clothes. The water rippled softly, catching the afternoon light. That's when the breeze carried a voice from the kitchen window. Familiar, cheerful, and almost musical. It was Alex's mother, speaking on the phone. Her tone was sweet, warm, filled with quiet excitement. She's the daughter of a large corporation, beautiful, well-mannered. If Alex marries her, our families will be perfectly matched. The words didn't pierce like knives. Instead, they seeped in slowly, like cold water soaking into stone. Tu Na's hands stilled. The fabric slipped beneath her fingers, but she hardly noticed. Her name hadn't been mentioned, not once. That silence spoke louder than rejection. The world seemed to dim around her. For days, Alex had searched for her. He had waited, hoped, even sent gifts. But now Tu Na wondered, was it really love he offered, or simply duty disguised as kindness? That night, while the baby breathed peacefully beside her, Tu Na lay awake staring at the wooden ceiling. She thought of Alex's eyes, always kind, but never completely open. She remembered the way his voice softened when he said her name, and how a pause always followed, as if he was holding something back. Maybe she was just a passing chapter in his story, a brief detour before the right woman stepped in. She didn't cry. She rarely did. But something inside her bent that night, like bamboo under a weight it couldn't quite resist. The certainty she once held, that she could return to the farm, start again, began to fade like mist at dawn. In another part of town, Alex studied his reflection in the mirror. It told the truth he wouldn't admit out loud. His hair had grown too long, brushing against his collar. His face was shadowed with stubble, his eyes dulled with sleepless nights. His mother noticed. She fussed lightly, sighing, scolding him for letting himself go. Alex only smiled faintly. He didn't tell her the truth. That since Tu Na left, sleep came late and left early. Meals tasted of nothing. Even the lively bustle of the farm couldn't quiet the heaviness pressing inside his chest. He missed her. He missed Tu Na's quiet presence in the kitchen, her gentle voice when she spoke to the baby, the way she lowered her gaze when emotions threatened to rise between them. That morning, after a silent breakfast, Alex stood abruptly and reached for his coat. "I'll get a haircut," he said flatly, to no one in particular. His mother blinked in surprise, but stayed silent. At the barbershop, the buzz of clippers and soft snip of scissors filled the air. A simple haircut, but for Alex, it meant something more. Preparation, readiness, hope. He didn't know what choice Tu Na would make. But if she looked at him again, he wanted to meet her eyes without guilt, without expectation. Outside, the clouds shifted. Somewhere beyond those streets, Tu Na sat quietly, wondering if she still belonged in his world. Back at the farmhouse, The smell of warm rice and eggs filled the air as Alex stepped inside. His mother was setting the table. His sister offered him a small nod, quiet but acknowledging. The familiar sounds of dishes, the soft sizzle from the pan, it all felt the same, and yet so hollow. Tu Na wasn't there. As they sat down, his mother tried gently. "I made Tu Na's favorite." She smiled, as if saying the words aloud might somehow bring her back. Alex looked down at his plate. "She's safe," he murmured, "but I don't know if she'll return." His sister froze, chopsticks hovering. A flicker of guilt flashed across her face. She inhaled slowly before speaking. "I said things to her, things I shouldn't have. I was harsh. It wasn't fair." Silence fell, not sharp or angry, but heavy. Heavy with words that had come too late. Finally, his sister whispered, "I need to see her, not to persuade her, just to say I'm sorry." Alex didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on a dish in front of him, untouched. At last, he gave a small nod. Elsewhere, Tu Na sat with her child, unaware of the conversation unfolding. But the air seemed to shift around her, as though forgiveness was taking its first quiet breath. The path to the little wooden house curled through bamboo and hills. Tu Na was rocking the baby when the knock came. She opened the door and froze. Alex's sister stood there, not proud, not cold, just human. Tu Na stepped aside silently. The house was small, humble, held together by time and kindness. They sat near the doorway, where soft afternoon light slanted in. I came to apologize," the sister began. Her gaze lowered. "I spoke harshly before. I was wrong. You didn't deserve that." Tu Na's fingers curled slightly in her lap. Her voice, when it came, was calm but distant. "It's all right. People say things when they don't understand." The baby stirred in the corner, letting out a soft sigh in sleep. The sister smiled at the sound, and for a moment, the heaviness eased. "I heard you might not return," she said gently. Tu Na hesitated. Her eyes wandered to the window, to the fading light beyond the trees. "I haven't decided yet." She didn't explain about the phone call, about the ache, about how a single conversation could redirect the path of a heart. Her sister only nodded. "Whatever you choose, I hope it brings you peace." As the sun dipped low, she rose to leave. No promises, no pressure, just two women parting, one lighter, the other still carrying something unnamed. The sky glowed pale gold when Alex arrived. He paused outside, watching smoke curl from the chimney, listening to the faint calls of birds in the trees. Then, with hesitant steps, he knocked. The door opened. Tu Na stood there. They looked at each other. Not awkward, not tense, just full. Full of nights unspoken, questions unanswered. The baby cooed softly behind her. Alex smiled faintly. "I came to ask if you've thought about it," he said quietly. "Come back." Tu Na didn't reply right away. Behind her, the old woman, Batong, stepped forward, gently rocking the child in her arms. "He's helped you so much," she said kindly. "He came every day, asking, searching." Tu Na lowered her gaze. "I'm not sure yet. I'm grateful, but I still haven't sorted everything inside me." Alex nodded, not pressing further. "I can wait," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Then, softer still, "I want you to return, not because you owe me anything, but because you choose to. As Alex carefully lifted her bags into the back of the car, Tu Na turned away from the door, hiding her face. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't know if it was sorrow or relief, maybe both. The scent of bamboo and dusk hung in the air. Leaves rustled softly as Alex strapped the baby's belongings into place, his movements gentle, deliberate. He didn't ask for more than she was ready to give. And in that silence, something fragile, trust, perhaps, began to take root again. The road back to the farm curved through quiet hills, the evening wind brushing against the fields. Inside the car, Tu Na sat in the passenger seat, the baby warm and asleep in her arms, wrapped in a blanket that still carried the faint smell of the old wooden house. The child stirred only once, then sighed, safe. Alex drove without speaking, not because there was nothing to say, but because silence sometimes carried more meaning than words ever could. Tu Na turned to the window. The trees she once knew so well passed by, their outlines blurred against the fading sky. She recognized the distant fields, the chimney smoke curling above the farmhouse. Everything looked unchanged. But inside, everything felt different. Her heart was divided. One part longed for the stillness she had with Ba Tong, the mornings filled with the earthy smell of mung simmering over the fire, the safety of a life where no one looked at her too closely. The other part responded quietly to Alex. The way he glanced at the baby through the rearview mirror, the care with which he had carried her bags, the way he never once demanded, "Why did you leave?" But he hadn't mentioned the phone call. He hadn't asked if she knew. Did he even know himself? And if he did, what then? Was her return a step forward, or simply a way to ease the ache? She lowered her gaze and brushed a fingertip against the baby's cheek. The child shifted, then settled again, safe in her arms. The road wound on into the dusk. Tu Na couldn't tell where this choice would lead, or if her place in Alex's world was truly permanent. For now, she was going back. Not to a promise, but to a possibility. The gates of the farm creaked open slowly, like an old friend greeting her after years apart. The soft dusk light spilled in as the car rolled through. Tu Na stepped out, the baby sleeping soundly against her shoulder. His tiny breath was warm on her skin. Alex walked ahead of her, carrying her bag. He didn't look back, as though afraid that if he met her eyes now, everything might unravel. The air smelled of earth freshly turned. Somewhere beyond the hill, the workers were finishing their day. The farm was the same, yet Tu Na was not. At the entrance of her old room, she stopped. The door stood open, the space within waiting. Nothing had changed. The curtains she had hemmed still hung at the window. A chipped cup sat on the table, familiar in its imperfection. The bed, untouched, seemed to hold the shape of someone who had been waiting. Tu Na laid the baby down gently, adjusting the blanket. Then she turned to the door. Alex was there, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "If anything here makes you uncomfortable, tell me." She looked at him, really looked. There was no pressure in his face, no demand, only quiet hope. For the first time, something unspoken passed between them, something beyond gratitude, beyond obligation. Tu Na gave a small nod. "I'll stay, for now." Alex didn't step closer. He simply smiled, faint but genuine. Outside, the wind moved through the bamboo, brushing against the windows like a lullaby. As Tu Na watched him walk away into the evening light, She whispered softly to herself, not a promise, but a vow only her heart could hear. If one day he looks at me not as someone he saved, but as someone he needs, then I'll stay for good. Days passed. The farm came alive again with its steady rhythm. Workers moving through the fields, the kitchen echoing with the clatter of dishes, the baby's soft cries blending with the hum of cicadas. Life continued, but between Alex and Tu Na, silence remained. Not cold, not hostile, just silence, carrying questions neither dared to ask. Alex watched her quietly, the way she folded laundry near the window, the way she leaned over the baby's crib, humming softly. He longed to speak, to say what pressed against his chest, but each time, the words dissolved before reaching his lips. Tu Na, too, felt the weight of the unspoken. She noticed the effort Alex made, the way he rose earlier to help with the chores, the way he avoided burdening her with farm matters. He was present, steady. But she also remembered his mother's words, carried to her by the wind. Was she simply an interlude before the woman of perfect match arrived? One evening, as twilight deepened, Alex stood in the yard, staring out at the fields. His sister approached quietly, stopping a few paces away. "She's still here," the sister said softly. Alex nodded. "For now." His sister hesitated, then added, "Don't let her carry it alone. You have to tell her what's in your heart, or she'll never know." He didn't answer right away. His hands tightened at his sides. Finally, he whispered, "I'm afraid. If I tell her, and she leaves." The sister's voice was firm, but kind. "If you stay silent, she'll leave anyway." Inside the house, Tu Na sat beside the baby's crib, her mind far away. She thought about the old woman's words, about how Alex had searched for her day after day. She thought about the apology his sister had offered, about the way Alex carried her bags without asking for anything in return. She also thought about the phone call, the cheerful voice of a mother planning a different future. The ache remained, but so did the hope. That night, as the wind stirred the bamboo outside, Alex finally knocked on her door. Tu Na turned. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched, full of everything they had yet to say. Then Alex stepped closer, his voice low, uncertain but steady. "I know my mother spoke to someone about arranging a marriage. I don't know if you heard, but I need you to know. It's not what I want." Tu Na's breath caught. She looked at him, searching for doubt, but found none. "I don't need a perfect match," he continued. "I need you. Not because of the baby, not because of what's expected. Because when you're here, this place feels alive. And when you're gone, everything feels empty." Tu Na's eyes lowered, her fingers curling lightly against her lap. The words pressed into her heart, both heavy and freeing. "I'm afraid," she admitted quietly, "afraid that one day you'll look at me differently, that I'll only ever be a woman you once saved." Alex's voice softened. "Then let me prove otherwise. Not with promises, just with days, with the way I show up, with the way I stay." The room was still. The baby stirred faintly in the crib, then sighed. Tu Na looked up again, meeting his gaze. For the first time, there was no wall between them, only the fragile beginning of something new. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she gave the smallest of nods, a nod that meant, "I'll try." Alex exhaled, a quiet relief filling his chest. Outside, the night deepened. The bamboo whispered in the wind. And inside that little farmhouse, two people stood on the edge of something not yet certain, but real. Not a promise, not a guarantee, but a beginning. Tu Na's quiet life changes when she overhears Alex's mother arranging a marriage between him and the daughter of a wealthy family. Her absence in that conversation cuts deeper than rejection, leaving her wondering if Alex's kindness is love or just responsibility. While Alex struggles with sleepless nights and an emptiness that the farm cannot fill, his sister seeks out Tu Na to apologize for her harsh words. Guilt, silence, and forgiveness weave their way into fragile bonds. Alex finally comes to bring Tu Na and the baby back, not demanding, but waiting patiently for her choice. Back at the farm, familiar surroundings feel unfamiliar to her heart. Between the echo of his mother's plans and Alex's quiet hope, Tu Na must decide. Will she stay as someone saved or embrace the possibility of being truly needed?